senior Sitecore developer and technical lead. He was 4 times awarded Sitecore Technology Most Valuable Professional starting from 2018. He has extensive experience in ASP.NET, programming since 2009, and recently his focus is on web-based applications using technologies such as Sitecore.NET and Core.NET. So, Tamas, are you ready? You have 40 minutes, and I can pass the mic to you.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation for this meetup. Yeah, it's already really interactive, so thumbs up for you. Let me share my screen. I will share my whole screen because my presentation will also include a demo. So I hope you can see my screen. If not, please let me know. Okay, great. So today my talk will be about discovering the Sitecore 10 ASP.NET Core SDK, which released around half year ago at the end of next year, together with the first release of Sitecore 10. Yeah, a bit about me. I think most of the things were already said, so I don't repeat. But you can, yes, of course, you can find my blog, and you can also find me on Twitter. There I am mostly active about Sitecore, and also you can contact me on Sitecore Slack if you wish. Yep, that's all about me. So let's maybe jump into the topic. About the agenda first. We will have a quick look on the architecture of the ASP.NET Core rendering host SDK. So what it gives us as an architecture. Then about how to start with this new SDK and how you can start on your local machine in some minutes. Then I will talk a bit about the basic features, what it gives you, and then I will show you a short demo or about 20 minutes. Let's see, and then we can talk about the pros and cons, and here if you have any knowledge to share or idea, let's have a discussion about this. Let's dive into the architecture overview first. As you probably all know, the layout service came in to Sitecore in the release of Sitecore JavaScript services. This was around, I don't know, about 2 or 3 years ago. This means basically you can implement around the layout service any kind of SDKs. So that's how the .NET Core also came in and implemented by the Sitecore team. Basically, it's a service which represents a page layout in a JSON instead of the HTML, which we have used to in the Sitecore MVC and web forms world before. And as I said, this really gives the possibility to implement any development toolkit around it. And yeah, it's platform independent. So it doesn't need to be JavaScript or .NET. It can be also, I don't know, PHP or whatever, which can call this API endpoint. Yes, so basically the main difference between the HTML and the JSON is that probably most of you know that the JSON is more readable for a programming language than an HTML, because the HTML is expected to be not fully the same all the time, and it's not valid all the time, but the JSON needs to be valid and it can be easily parsed to different objects. And yes, that's when the .NET Core comes in. So as I said, the Sitecore team already implemented this .NET Core SDK, mainly around the layout service, but there are also other services which is provided by the Sitecore content deliveries. So let's talk about a few parts, or the main parts of the ASP.NET Core SDK. The first one is what is included in the SDK itself is the client implementation for the layout service. So this basically means the ASP.NET application requesting this layout service for the page JSON response and processing it. The next one is the placeholder rendering, which gives you the possibility to have dynamic renderings inside the ASP.NET Core application. Of course, it needs to have some field helpers, which means to read fields in an easy way from the layout service response, and this is what the field helpers are for. And then, of course, it needs to, if it's Sitecore, it needs to support the multi-language capabilities, and this is done by the ASP.NET Core built-in localization. We can have a look on that at the demo. And of course, to process the layout service response, to make it easily programmable, we need some kind of binding. So how the renderings and the models are bound together. And for that, we have different model binding strategies. I will also show that and make it clear if it's not clear yet. And of course, it supports the experience editor with tag helpers. Tag helper, if you're not familiar with ASP.NET Core, tag helper is a common extension which basically supports the view files to render some kind of HTML and make it reusable. And this SDK is also supports the analytics and personalization. Also, of course, the personalization and the analytics part is done in the Sitecore content delivery servers. But the .NET Core SDK is strictly connected to it, so that's why it's possible, just like with the JavaScript services. So these are, let's say, the 7 main or key features which the SDK provides you. And now maybe let's have a deeper look on how the process of the request looks like if you have .NET Core application used. Basically, you have two instances. One is the ASP.NET Core application, which is connected to the traditional Sitecore content deliveries. And you can imagine the ASP.NET Core application like a client-side implementation, and the Sitecore content delivery is the backend. So when the request comes in, first it goes to the rendering host, which is the ASP.NET Core application. HTTP request is coming in, and there is a controller action which is then hit by this request. And this action is calling the rendering engine middleware, which is then routing basically the same request to the Sitecore content delivery. And the Sitecore content delivery is responding us with the layout service API. or actually the rendering host is calling the layout service API. And then here we have the JSON response. And from the JSON response, we go back to the rendering host, to the rendering engine middleware to process the response. And then all the placeholder and component resolving is happening in the rendering host. After that, we have all the model bindings. So to bind different parts of the JSON response to different view components in the rendering host. And after all everything is done, then the response goes back to the client browser. Yes, I will also show this in the demo. So now it's about how to start with the ASP.NET Core SDK, how to use and install. You have to install it on two places, on the Sitecore instance, and also, of course, you will need to have an ASP.NET Core application. One way is that to use the pre-built Docker image from Sitecore, or there is a separated package which you can install on your Sitecore instance. This is called the Sitecore Headless Rendering Package, or maybe it's already renamed to Sitecore Rendering Host package. On the rendering host instance, which is the .NET Core application, you can use the starter template, which I have been used for this demo, because Sitecore created a starter package in the rendering host project. So then you just need to hit the run button, and then the application is up and running, and the connection is made to the Sitecore server. Or, of course, you can install the NuGet packages and configure the rendering host one by one and manually. I don't really recommend this. I recommend just to use the starter template. It's not much in it, so it's easier to delete something from it if you don't need than starting from the scratch, in my opinion. So the next big topic to talk about is about the basic features. Then the first one is about the content resolver. If you are already familiar with JavaScript services, this already existed in that. Basically, this is the Sitecore content delivery side implementation of your renderings. To make it clear. So this is responsible for the JSON response for rendering item. On the rendering item, if you create one rendering item, you can select what kind of content resolver should be used. There are a few of them built in by Sitecore. These are those. So the context item children resolver, which is resolving all the children of the context item of the page. There is the context item resolver, which is resolving the context item, as it says. And we have the data source item children resolver, which is resolving data source and not the data. So it's really important here that it doesn't resolve the data source item itself. It's only resolving the children. And the same applies for the context item children resolver. So that's why we have these two different resolvers or type of resolvers. The next one is the data source resolver, is when you just need to use, or when you just need to have or render the data source field on the rendering host application. And we have the next two, which is not as important for now. Definitely, if you will go to production with an ASP.NET Core rendering host application, you will need to implement your own content resolvers For example, if you would like to build up a special navigation or sitemap or things like that, I recommend to use the content resolver or GraphQL. I will also talk about the GraphQL part here. By default, you can't merge these two different content resolvers to each other. So for example, if you have a rendering which needs the context item and it needs also the context item children's, this is not possible by default to merge these two together, but there is already an implementation exists by Nick Hills. This is called the chained content resolvers. So this means you can chain together two content resolver. So you don't need to implement your own if you want to have the context item and, for example, the context item children as well in one resolver. And the other way of responsing content in the layout service is to use the GraphQL. Instead of if you want to use GraphQL, then instead of the content resolver on the rendering, you need to write a GraphQL query, which is a query language in general to ask what you need from an endpoint. Yes, and until now, Sitecore doesn't support it out of the box in the rendering host itself. But as you maybe expected, there is also a solution by Göran Halfarsson about making it work. So that's also possible to use GraphQL in your rendering host solution. All right, the next topic is the model binding. I have been already talking about this a bit. This is about to bind your models to your renderings, and the concept is very similar to the Grasshopper. So to have .NET objects which you can work with in the rendering host solution. The main difference is here that Grasshopper is mostly represents one relation to the template of for example, of the data source. But as we have using here the content resolvers doesn't need to be just one relation between template, although it's also possible. For example, if you use the data source content resolver or the context item content resolver. This is basically the .NET objects which are representing the JSON response of that rendering. There are two possible ways to bind your models in the rendering host. The first one is the model bound view. Is usually used, actually is used when you don't need let's say a backend code and you just want to work with the view. In this case, instead of the my model, you can use your own model, and as a parameter you need to pass the view name, and then in that view you can use, in this case, the my model. I will show you an example of this, and also about I will show you also an example of the view component. The view component is usually used when you need some backend logic, so you don't want to implement everything in the view. Then you can bind your model in to the view like this in the view component. All right. So the next always a big topic for Sitecore about caching. So as you probably know, Sitecore is heavily caching in different layers the data and also the HTML and how it looks like in the rendering host. The same caching mechanism is still used in the Sitecore instances. So I will also show this, but if you select to have a JSON rendering and not MVC rendering or web forms, there you still have the caching options because the JSON response is still cached by the Sitecore content delivery servers, like the good old HTML caching. And at the moment, Sitecore has no out-of-the-box caching implemented in the ASP.NET Core SDK. This means anytime there is a request to your ASP.NET Core application, it always goes to the Sitecore content delivery server and requesting the data from that, and then rendering it in the rendering host, and then it goes back to the client browser. And basically, this means on the Sitecore content delivery servers, you will have the same load as you would have with the Sitecore MVC application. As one of my POC, I implemented how you can do this with output caching, with the built-in output caching of the .NET Core. This basically relies on the Sitecore publishing webhook. Oh, sorry, my dog. So here I was. Yes, so you can implement using the Sitecore publishing webhook, which is a hook event is running on the publish end. So when you publish a site or an item under a site in Sitecore content management server, then after the publish is done, then it can trigger or call different endpoints and, for example, trigger a cache clear of your rendering host. If you want to have more info about this, you can go to the post on my blog. And the next one is the translation API. Sitecore, as you know, has the dictionary as a feature. And at the moment, there is no translation API client-side implementation yet in the SDK out of the box. But I have also implemented one for this, and you can find the POC on my blog. Basically, the endpoint is already available, which is containing all the dictionaries for a site and language. And what I did here as a POC just implemented the client-side wrapper to call this endpoint, and also having some kind of a caching mechanism. And yeah, there is a cache in this API also on the Sitecore side, which is not causing an intermediate update after the publish. I reported this bug last week. Hopefully, in the next release, they will fix this or make it configurable. And yes, here is also the link to my POC. So let's then go to the demo. So what I have done, I have done using the Sitecore rendering host starter template, which is basically generating two projects inside one solution. One is for the Sitecore implementation, so it's really it's just a .NET framework application, and here is the .NET Core application, which is the rendering host. There is not much implementation in the platform. It's just generated and it's generating some configurations. These are all custom implementations already. So what you will get if you generate this project with the .NET Core CLI, you will get basically a few config files which will be deployed. But you will get much more thing in the rendering host. And let's have a look first on the startup. This configure services is one of the methods which is running on startup of the rendering host application. So all the configurations are done in this method. I will just go through on the important ones. So maybe let's check. Let's go to the one important one is to use request localization. This means in the rendering host application, you need to predefine all the languages which will be used by your rendering host application. So it's not enough if you create a language in Sitecore. You will also need to register the language here in your application. At the moment, just to make it simple, it's hard-coded, but of course you can put it out to the app settings, to JSON, and read it from the configuration file. And another important place is where you bind your models. So I have two kind of renderings available or implemented. One is the content block, which is coming by default with the template, and the other one is the children block, which is a view component. But let's maybe start from the Sitecore side first. Oh, it's still logged in. So let's check. The important part is the rendering. I have two renderings here, which I registered also in my rendering host. So I have the same names as I have here. This is making the mapping between these two renderings. So let's have a look on the children block. As you can see, this is a JSON rendering, so it's not controller rendering or view rendering anymore. It's a JSON rendering. This means it will output a JSON. Here you set up all the usual fields like data source location, data source template. It's really similar like for the controller renderings. But what is new in this field is one is the GraphQL, but it's not used at the moment by this demo. And here is the rendering content resolver. So this is really important. If you have a rendering, you need to set this up. And here you have the chance to select one of them. Here I'm using the data source item children resolver because this rendering is basically just running through all the children of this data source and renders that out to the client. And as you can see, as I talked about the caching, you can also set up the same, or you have the same setup caching fields as for all the other type of renderings. So after I have the rendering, then I can start implement my rendering host implementation. So let's start with this children block. As this is a view component, this should be the same name as I have it in the view components folder, so then it can resolve. So on the request, it goes in, and it's really simple. I'm not doing anything here. I could have also done with the view component here. It's just about to show how you can use the view model binder. Basically, you just need to use this class and inject it to your view component, and then you can bind the view context to your model. So let's have a look on this model. This is the representation of the layout response, or part of the layout response. Here it says, I'm expecting here the children, which is a list of item link fields. Item link field is basically just a wrapper around this model to be able to read the fields. And this is the real model I have also in Sitecore. So I have here some title, text, image, drop link, and some general link. And if I go to my my rendering host endpoint, so this is the ASP.NET Core application itself, then here are the children I am rendering out. Let's have a look on the Sitecore side, how it looks like. So this is the home page, and this is the data source, and these are all the children's which you can see here. So this is the first one with some lorem ipsum text and the images, or image, the drop link value, and general link. The model list is not used for now, it's just still in progress. Yeah. What I really like about this rendering host is that you don't need to deploy anymore your application to Sitecore. You can just basically run with Control F5, and then you can run it as a local host, and it's really easy to debug. You don't need to attach to the IIS process anymore. You can debug directly from Visual Studio. What I want to show you in debug mode, this is the huge layout response I got from the Sitecore content delivery server. Yeah, it seems like I have a recursive call. So let me just do some fix here. Content log model. Yeah, we just remove this multi-list. Publish it. Let me rerun. Now we should see a less response from the layout service. Yes, this looks better. So this is the full JSON. As you can see, layout service response JSON, which we got from the Sitecore content delivery server. And let's just go through a bit, not all of the fields, but a few of them. So as you can see, it says which database is used, which layout ID, which template ID of the page, what is the template name of the context page. And then here comes the placeholders. So inside this placeholder, I have this rendering with this unique ID, and this rendering has these fields, or basically these are not fields, because you can see this is called items, and as I'm using the data source item children resolver, it's returning an array of items. And here you can see the JSON representation of basically what I can see here. So if yeah, here is the text field, which is then this one, and here I should see the drop link, this one, and so on. And of course, to use this layout response, that's why we are using this model binding. So the mapping between this response and our models in the rendering host are done automatically based on the field names and the property names. If you want to use a different name, for example, I don't know, here you have a space, you can define also the name of the field. If I would have the drop link defined like this. Okay, maybe I should have, yeah, I don't remember, but there is a property which you can use to have an argument with the name. What I still want to show you is the view part. So yeah, this is called by the view component initially, and this one is calling another view called the content block. And here you can see the tag helpers, which is provided by the SDK. So for example, the RC link is a tag helper which is responsible to render this general link as an HTML. And we have one for text and also for image. Not for the drop link. For the drop link, you need to use, of course, the model to define what you want to render from the selected drop link. And of course, as I said, Experience Editor is also supported. This is the last thing I will show you now and how that works. You can define in the startup if the Experience Editor is supported by your rendering host with this line. Then I can open it also in Experience Editor, and by using the tag helpers I shown before, by default you can edit the fields in Experience Editor. Of course, things like the drop link you can't edit, but image, text, and rich text you can edit. All right. Let me continue with the presentation. Just believe me, it's working. But on the first load, it always takes a few seconds.
Yes, I just wanted to mention, if possible, 4 minutes left.
Yes,
Okay.
I am on it. So the last slide is left basically to collect the pros and the cons of using the rendering host. One of the pros is definitely using new technology. So the HR and the developers are happy. It's easier to hire someone with new technology than with the old one, like the .NET framework and the ASP.NET MVC. It also has a better scaling, because if you want to scale, for example, in the cloud, to have multiple rendering hosts, you don't need to scale the whole Sitecore content delivery environment. You can just scale the rendering host itself, and you don't need extra license for that and things like that. And of course, it's more lightweight because it's not a full Sitecore, so it's really an ASP.NET Core application which is connected to the Sitecore content delivery with the API. And there is no any database connection or any other Sitecore related caching or things like that. Yes, as I showed you, it brings you faster debugging. You can just use the F5 in Visual Studio and you are ready to go. Also faster deployment. So if I do a code change in the rendering host, I don't need to deploy to the Sitecore instance. I can deploy to my rendering host instance, which needs less time to start up than a Sitecore instance. And it's platform independent hosting like the .NET Core provides you. So if you wish, you can also run it in a Linux environment. Yeah, let's talk about the cons a bit. Of course, the infrastructure is getting a bit more complex because of this extra rendering host role. So this basically means a new layer which wasn't there before for the backend developers. And of course, there is less shared knowledge than with the Sitecore MVC yet. So as this is still fresh, I haven't seen too much applications in production with the rendering host yet. Not that much things out there yet, but we are happy to help you out. And of course, no official output caching yet. I hope it will come with the next releases because mine is really just a POC and waiting for one from the Sitecore. And yes, here are the sources I have used. Basically the Sitecore documentation, and there is also a nice video from Nick about the ASP.NET Core rendering host. And feel free to use the headless channel in the Sitecore chat or a headless tag on the Sitecore Stack Exchange. And thank you very much, just in time.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. We have already one question in the chat, and I wanted to mention also one thing, that we are not going to share your presentation, so I will place in the chat all the links which you placed into the presentation. Is that fine? Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
Sure. That's fine. Thank you.
While I'm doing that, Artur, Sigur, maybe you want to ask your question yourself?
Yeah. My question was: has anybody attempted already to use this in like production environment for like bigger Sitecore implementations? And if yes, then are there like big underwater rocks that we should be aware of?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know anyone yet who used the rendering host implementation in the production environment. I am sure, based on the Sitecore Slack, there are some projects in progress. So I don't know all the bottlenecks which could come with the production. But actually, we are hosting. Let's say we have our own layout service with one of my projects, and there we are using the ASP.NET Core. Just we implemented our own SDK a few years back, and it can really work out well because with the caching. So if you have a good caching of the responses of your Sitecore instance, it can really get the load off from your Sitecore instance and move it to the rendering host. And on the rendering host, you can scale more easily than on a Sitecore instance. So that's the experience I have personally. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
And maybe a follow-up question. How do you find like development experience for this approach rather than comparing to like, let's say the classic MVC?
Yeah, it's much more fluent and it's really faster. So I think it's also a point that you can develop much more faster than in the classical MVC solutions, because I think the key point is that you don't need to deploy to Sitecore that frequently than with the Sitecore MVC. So I was just also exploring the rendering host. So I didn't use yet on a real project, but we are planning to use it on the next one, hopefully in this year. But I really suggest to give it a try with the Docker and the starter template. It's really easy to set up. Basically, you just need to run 2 commands and the whole environment is up and running, and play around with the rendering cost. If you want to feel the experience with the rendering cost.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Don't be shy, guys.
If any question came up to you or coming up later, you can also reach me on Slack or on Twitter if you like. I'm happy to answer.
Thank you. Yeah, great. I
have a question,
Oh,
Svetlana.
thank you.
Yeah. So, what do you suggest in terms of we basically know the JSS because it's very widely accepted, and now this rendering host. So, what do you think the similarities or the disadvantages or advantages when compared to JSS?
Yeah. It's I think also depending on how you use the JSS. So if you use the client side rendering, because if you use the client side rendering, then it's really you don't have this extra layer with like you have with the rendering cost. I think it's more like a transition from the MVC development to the .NET Core implementation for the backend devs. Because if you have already a good knowledge at your company with JavaScript services or with React or Angular or Vue, then I would suggest to use that. But if you maybe have less JavaScript knowledge and more backend and .NET, then I would go in the direction of the .NET Core.
But do you think Sitecore is supporting the same way as it is supporting JSS as well with the rendering host of .NET?
Yes, I think definitely they are.
Okay.
They are supporting that in this way. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Maybe like a philosophical question. Have you heard like what kind of new features will be coming in with next Sitecore versions regarding .NET Core renderings? Like one thing you mentioned was caching, and then maybe something else.
Yeah, caching is definitely coming in some way. I also heard something about the Sitecore forms, and I think they are planning to have support for the Sitecore forms in the SDK. I think they, in the long term, they really would like to cover the same feature set as we have in the JavaScript services in all of the JavaScript SDKs. But yeah, nothing secret, I know, unfortunately.
Yes, lots of changes. I think developers are always eager to know what's coming up.
Yes.
It's okay. May something off topic. Are all those guitars yours?
Yes.
You see on that screen.
Yes, it's only the guitars which I have on the wall. So. Yeah.
Okay, good. So you're also fond of music.
Yes. I really like to play music.
We will have now a break. Okay, guys, let's meet. Let's say 5:05, and we will stay here for a small quiz. So yeah, Tamas, you're also welcome to stay and take part in the quiz. And that, yeah, would be great to see if you could present something from with your guitar. It would be also very nice. Such an informal break here.